Hello everyone, and welcome to the video about the wondrous creatures known as Cnidarians. So, what are Cnidarians? Well, they have radial symmetry. They have either polyps or medusa. So polyps are a cylindrical body with a mouth opening at one end. They are typically sessile, and they include, as you can see, an anemone. An anemone. So as you can see, they're stuck to the ground. That is what sessile means. They cannot move, although some can actually move, but typically in adult life they are not able to. So they have, as I said before, the radial symmetry. They don't have bilateral symmetry, but rather radial. And they have the tissue level of organization. They have specialized tissue. These can include their poisonous barb cells, which are cnidocytes. They do have a response to stimuli as well. They have a nerve net that acts like a nervous system, gives touch, smell, and sight, which the only sight that they have is light. Their impulses can actually cause cell contractions. So that's pretty interesting. So there are two forms, body forms of Cnidarians, which include polyp, which I said before is a cylindrical body with a mouth opening on one end, and then a medusa, which is a free-floating. They're jellyfish, and they have tentacles. So I'm going to pull up a picture of those two. Don't mind the quality, but you can get the general idea across. So it includes the ectoderm, which is the blue, as you can see here. It's the outside. Sorry, I just had to make that a little bit smaller. So it has the ectoderm, which is the outside, and then the endoderm, which is the inside portion, protecting. It has the mesoglia inside, which is the pink, and it's a jelly-like substance. They also have large tentacles, as you can see here. They also have both stages of polyps and medusa, but they mostly stay as the medusa. So this is a polyp, and it goes into the medusa, but majority of its life is spent as a medusa. And it has mobility, which means that it floats near the water surface, and they're very good swimmers. They can swim both vertically and horizontally. So that's pretty cool. And then the polyps. I forgot to mention that medusas are class Cyphozoa, and polyps are class Anthozoa. So they are benthic. They are sessile, which cannot mean they cannot move. These include corals. They're sedentary. They can move, but spend most of their life in one spot, which are sea anemones. So then they also have radial chambers, which means that they radiate compartments. They have radiating compartments of the gastrovascular cavity to increase the surface area. They like splitting a stomach into segments, which helps process more food, helps provide the animal support. And for sea anemones, they're solitary. They have no hard skeleton. You know they're quite mushy. You've seen in Finding Nemo. They're very soft. So their habitat is deep and shallow waters. They're found all over the world, but most diversity is found in tropical waters. They have a pedal disc, which adheres them to the ground. It's the opposite of the mouth and acts as a foot. So the pedal is right there, the bottom part. And then their mouth is over here. So they can have some form of movement. They turn on their sides and crawl around on the side, or they flip upside down and coral on their tentacles. They have movement. A few species can actually detach the pedal disc and swim with their tentacles, but only for a very brief amount of time. They only do this to avoid getting eaten by predators. Their predators mostly consist of sea stars, and they are solitary, which means they live alone. They do not like other anemones, and they have a tentacle that fires upon contact with another sea anemone and poisons the other anemone. They also have spatial distribution so that they don't take each other's resources. Very much unlike coral. Coral is colonial. They live in colonies. They love being with other corals. They grow on top of each other, and they secrete a hard skeleton around the body that actually can be hard or soft. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a hard skeleton. So the hard ones are calcium carbonate, and they are called stony corals. They are what helped build coral reefs and have zooxanthellae. Don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Coral bleaching is actually a really big issue. So I've attached here an image of coral bleaching. So coral bleaching is an event. It's very detrimental. It's caused by climate change in the water. It could be typically like 1 degree over the amount that they can handle. It can be caused by runoff and pollution, overexposure to sunlight, or extreme low tide. The process of the coral bleaching is it gets stressed, as you can see in this second stage here. So corals are basically made up of tiny algae that live inside and photosynthesize, but when it's hot, the coral basically thinks that itself is wrong, so it expels the algae, and then the coral is left behind bleached and vulnerable, which this is basically just a skeleton of the coral, and it turns white. It's more susceptible to diseases. They can sometimes recover, but they typically starve and die, and then they get covered with algae, and that is an indicator of coral death. This is class Cubozoa of the. So it's basically, they are also known as box jellyfish. They're tropical. They live in the south, near Australia and New Zealand. Many of their beaches close due to the large number of these jellyfish, they're very deadly. They are cube-shaped, hence the name Cubozoa. They are predators. They have complex eyes, actually. They have 24. They fix on an image so they can track prey. They have a more complex nerve system to support the eyes, and they range in size. So that is the class Cubozoa. So this is a hydra from class Hydrozoa. They're colonial, which means they live in colonies. They share resources. They have different polyps in colonies, specialized in different things. For example, feeding in productive polyps. They're typically very small. They have a pulsing movement, which keeps them from sinking, and they have mostly horizontal movement. They typically have no control over directions. They just go with the flow, quite literally. An example is Siphonophora, where they produce floating colonies. It's actually pretty cool. Then there's Portuguese man of war, and it has a sail to stay on top of the water, and they don't really move on their own. So yeah, those are the 3 classes. Anthozoa, which are corals and sea anemones, Cubozoa, which are box jellies, and Hydrozoa, which are the Portuguese man of war, as an example. There is one more very new class, I believe, and it's Ctenophora. They're typically referred to as comb jellies, and they're very similar to jellyfish, with the main difference being inability to sting prey or enemies. So you're basically like a jellyfish that does not have stinging capabilities. So now it's time for Cnidarian nutrition and ecology. So carnivores that use neurotoxins to shut down nerves. They secrete digestive enzymes from gastrovascular cavity to devour shrimp, fish, and plankton, and they have a 2-way digestive system rather than one way. So that means their food goes both in and out of the mouth. So they are food for sea turtles, Cranophoran sea star, and some fish. They form habitats, and they have medical purposes in surgery or bone grafts, and mutualism is very common in Cnidarians. For reproduction, they have alternation of generations, which is sexual reproductive phase, Medusa, followed by asexual phase, which is a polyp. So they reproduce asexually by budding, so they grow out of the parent cell, and sexually, they're male or female. The eggs and sperm are released and externally meet to form a zygote. They develop into a planula larvae, settles and transform to a polyp. And then for asexual, they undergo budding to produce a colony, and the cycle repeats. This is an excellent chart to keep in mind and remember all the classes of Cnidarians. Thank you and have a lovely day.